The second tool to evaluate the burden of disease related to environmental exposures are public health assessments. A public health assessment goes beyond a risk assessment by including data on an actual exposure in a community. Public health assessments have the potential for major impacts on large numbers of people because they address not just the risks in a specific location, such as in an occupational setting, but also the risks to a large number of individuals and often to the population as a whole. These types of risk assessments have been very controversial and often taken years, often decades to complete. Public health risk assessments examine the overall impact on a community, not just the risk to those exposed to high levels of the pollutant. Various forms of public health risk assessments have occurred since ancient times. For example, knowledge of the potential for lead poisoning goes back to ancient civilizations when the metal was widely used. For example, it was a component of water pipes and part of the process of making wine. Ben Franklin listed every known profession for which lead posed a health hazard and predicted that many years would pass before the public health consequences of lead were addressed. Of course, Benjamin Franklin was right. Things got worse before they got better as lead became part of industrial air pollution and was added to gasoline and paint to improve their performance. Let's look at the next tool, an ecological risk assessment. Environmental health cannot be viewed solely on the basis of current impacts on human health. The impacts of environmental contamination or pollution on plants and animals and the ecosystems in which they exist often have important long-term consequences. The modern environmental movement in the United States was ignited in large part by Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, which described how the widespread use of DDT, an insecticide, had threatened the American eagle and other birds as it became deposited and weakened their eggs. Efforts to protect the environment have been coupled with efforts to detect and react to elevated lead levels described on the previous page that presented in the public health assessment. It is now standard practice in pediatrics and public health to monitor blood levels in high-risk children, investigating their home environments and treating persistently elevated levels. Lead standards for playgrounds, lead abatement programs for home, and lead monitoring of consumer products all aim to reduce or eliminate the hazards of lead. The system is in no means foolproof, and in recent years, elevated levels of metal have been found from such divergent sources as toys manufactured in China and water in Washington, D.C.